Um, Welcome on, everyone. Thank you again for joining us tonight from whatever part of the world and the country you're joining us. There's so many uh, different communities represented in our attendance today. Um, we're very excited because we will be hosting this Peace Forum here tonight, and we want to welcome you all. My name is Nima. I'm with the International League of People's Struggle. We are a global alliance of grassroots democratic and anti-imperialist organizations fighting to address the um, genuine concerns and issues of the people, and ultimately to uproot imperialism itself. And we're joined today by speakers from many different movements and organizations all across the country. And our goal today is to really bring together those different experiences and lessons and come to an understanding of how the US war machine is really developing in the current moment. What is the direction of US-led war as a whole? How is it impacting our communities? But most importantly, as the theme states, our goal is to work towards dismantling the US war machine and really exchanging lessons in the struggle against these war profiteers and the war machine itself, which plunders our homeland and attacks our communities. And so we're so happy to be bringing all of us together today because, on the one hand, we hope that this is an educational opportunity, an opportunity to share analysis and learn from each other. But we also hope that this is a practical opportunity today coming together. Our goal coming out of this is not just to learn lessons, but to apply them in making change in our communities and society as a whole. Our hope is that in learning from these experiences of the different ways that people are fighting back, the different campaigns being waged across the country, we can also see how we can bring these back into the work that we do and continue to raise up the fight against US-led war, continue to raise up the fight for genuine sovereignty in our homelands, um, and continue to build a genuine and far-reaching anti-war movement in this country and firmly link up with the movements for liberation around the world. And so we're very excited, and thank you so much for joining us for our Peace Forum tonight. Throughout the discussion today, we'll have different speakers, but there will be a portion for questions and answers at the end. And we want to hear from all of you in attendance. So if anything comes up, you'll be able to share your questions in the chat. And we'll have a moderator be able to gather those questions, and then we'll be able to field them to the speakers and panelists at the end as well. And of course, there's always a limit to time, but there's so much to talk about. So if there are any questions that we're not able to get to tonight, we would love to stay in contact with all of you to be able to follow up and continue these conversations together. So don't be shy to share any of your thoughts, your experiences, your lessons, and questions, and help us make this a rich discussion where we can all build a strong movement together. So. Thank you, everyone. I'm continuing to see what folks are sharing in the chat. We'll pull some of those up. But without further ado, I'd like to go to the next slide so I can give a rundown of what we hope to cover today. So, like I mentioned, this Peace Forum has a couple different objectives, right? Education and practical action together. Of course, in order to make change in the world, we need to first have an understanding of things as they currently are and how they're developing. And so we will be beginning today with a political education and political situation or discussion, beginning with an analysis of the global situation of US-led war and the developments in the war machine. But then we'll also hear some particular lessons and analysis on different aspects of how US-led war is playing out. So in addition to the global strategy, we'll hear about a particularly aggressive initiative being waged by the US called the Pax Silica Agreement. And then we'll hear about the ongoing struggles against different expressions of US-led war and militarization from the fight against RIMPAC, both recently in the here and now, but the long legacy of the struggle against RIMPAC since it was begun, as well as different communities fighting against the ongoing US-backed militarization of Haiti and the Caribbean. And we hope that this political situation grounds us in a view of the world situation. And then we'll hear campaign sharings and practical lessons from our panelists who have been waging different types of fights against war profiteers and different institutions of US-led war um, to show us what the fight looks like on the ground as well. And then, as I mentioned, we'll have questions and answers before we close out with a summary of some of the main lessons and what we can do moving forward to carry this fight on together. So we hope to have a very rich discussion. And with that, I will be opening it up to our first speaker, Jerry Leasing, who is a member of PRIZO, as well as the Resist US-led War Movement and ILPS to give us the global world situation. So Jerry, when you're ready, take it away.
Hi everyone, my name is Jerry from the People's Resistance and International Solidarity Organization, or PRIZO. Like Nima mentioned, we're a member organization of both ILPS and the Resist US-led War Movement. And today I'll help situate us in the context of US's latest military moves so we can better understand what is this war machine that we're fighting against. And so in 2026, we have seen escalated US aggression around the world, starting in Latin America with the attacks on Venezuela and the abduction of President Nicolas Maduro, to the intensifying embargo, blockade, and sabotage on Cuba to the point where any day now the US is threatening to invade. The US is giving renewed attention to its neighbors in the South to try to capture the wealth of natural resources there while attacking anybody that dares to defend their sovereignty against US hegemony and the capitalist system. These attacks against Latin America extend even domestically to the US as Trump and his chief henchmen, Marco Rubio and Stephen Miller, have recently named Cuba the quote, 21st century capital of communism, branding those in solidarity of the Cuban Revolution and other anti-fascist, anti-imperialist, and socialist organizers as terrorists. And in West Asia, we have now surpassed 1,000 days of US-Israeli genocide as Palestinians continue to be murdered despite a supposed ceasefire. And it has been over 150 days since the renewed US war on Iran in a massive bombing campaign, which has included scores of assassinations and direct attacks on civilian infrastructure. Despite this, Iran has thwarted the US's attempts to crush the nation. The US and its proxy lapdogs like Israel and Saudi Arabia target all of those that are resisting, including the people of Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, and Yemen, and are actively bringing the war to other peoples as the extensive deployment of US troops, weaponry, and military bases in other countries are increasingly struck by the axis of resistance. The US's wars in West Asia prove to the world that the impacts of US-led war affect people of all nations, even the US's supposed allies in the region, and that there are desperate attempts at regime change in Iran, and the acts of aggression to reopen the Strait of Hormuz only continue to reveal the US's underlying interests in oil, trade routes, and natural resources. And meanwhile, in the Asia Pacific, the US has been rapidly increasing its attempts to open up a new theater of war against China. We see thousands of additional troops, armaments, missile systems, and other forms of military infrastructure being developed and deployed to nations in Oceania, Papua New Guinea, Indonesia, the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea, and many more. And military exercises like Balikatan, Freedom Shield, Super Garuda Shield, in the Rim of the Pacific, RIMPAC exercises, again, amongst others, continue to blur the lines between the supposed times of peace and times of war because of the increased frequency, displacement, and destruction they cause. Nonetheless, these exercises have proven to intensify counterinsurgency attacks against the people and their resistance, where the US military instructs puppet militaries how to use new military technologies and directly aids and abets their counterinsurgency operations and massacres. And we see this directly happening in places like the Philippines. And so this is the war, but what is the machine that powers it? The US government has orchestrated a vast network of military infrastructure to power its wars and reap huge profits. For decades, transnational weapons corporations such as Boeing or Lockheed Martin have raked in billions of dollars in government contracts to build sophisticated weaponry. Major tech companies from Amazon to OpenAI have become increasingly intertwined with US military interests. These corporations have embedded themselves in our universities and stretched their manufacturing and subsidiaries across every congressional district for political leverage. Their profits pad investment portfolios and retirement funds. And this year, just recently, US Congress approved a historic increase to the military budget to $1.15 trillion, with further proposals to increase it to $1.5 trillion. All the while, working people are feeling the brunt of the already rising prices and the effects of Trump's cuts to social services and healthcare. It may seem like an invincible infrastructure of death, but we know, however, in these US wars of aggression against the people, we've increasingly seen the points of vulnerability in the US war machine. Iran has exposed these gaps through its successful strings of attacks on US military bases, quickly emptying the expensive stockpiles of US Israeli munitions and air defense missiles that will take several years in a steady supply chain of difficult to acquire materials to restock. And this vulnerability is the type of gap Trump's national security strategy, which released last year in November, is trying to fill. And so here's just one example from that document. If we read, the huge gap demonstrated in recent conflicts between low-cost drones and missiles versus the expensive systems required to defend against them has laid bare our need to change and adapt. America requires a national mobilization to innovate powerful defenses at low cost to produce the most capable and modern systems and munitions at scale, and to reshore our defense industrial supply chains. And so here, Trump admits that despite the technological advantages of the US military, it is still losing against the people who are resisting its aggression. And so he is calling to, quote, reshore our defense industrial supply chains and to invest into developing the so-called defense industrial base, which is really just to increase manufacturing capacity for even more imperialist war. And, even just a few days after the national security strategy was released, the US established the Pax-Silica Initiative in December and has already led to expand and cement its global supply chain of critical minerals for use in its AI technology, um, you know, for the war economy. And so what Trump is outlining in the national security strategy is already happening in real time. And we are seeing that the current scale and scope of genocidal warfare by the US is not physically sustainable. Every point along the supply chain is a possible point of intervention and an opportunity to resist the US war machine. And so in, the San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in the heart of the tech and AI industry, the country where Prizo is based, we have companies like OpenAI, Scale AI, which are profiting off of the US's wars of aggression. And we recently learned after it was leaked that the San Francisco Police Department surveils our communities with Skydio drones, which are used abroad in the genocide in Palestine and in the massacres in the Philippines. And it is through these fights and campaigns against weapons manufacturers or war profiteers that we will be able to continue to maximize these vulnerabilities at every pressure point in the machine. And so today I'm super excited to hear from the range of speakers about their campaigns fighting against war profiteers and the war machine in different communities. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you so much, Jerry, for giving us a clear picture of the direction of US-led war around the world. Really, what we can see now is that the US is driving more and more and escalating its war against the people on all fronts, unleashing rising attacks here in the US against the people, but really escalating not just provocations, but all-out acts of war against our homelands around the world in its greedy drive to maintain its control of the world economy. But as Jerry said, in its drive for war and expansion, we're really starting to see the fault lines, the cracks, and the limitations in the US war machine, which is very big, but not infinite. And we're starting to see those limitations as it continues to drive for more. And in its effort to recover from that, one of the key components of the US's current strategy in the world is the Pax Silica initiative, an effort to bend the whole of the world's economy to serve its war buildup. And to give us a deeper dive into Pax Silica, I would like to introduce Nieves, who is the chairperson of Bayan USA, to give us the rundown. Welcome, Nieves.
Hello, thank you for having me. Next slide, please. So as people already touched on a bit, Pax Silica is a US-led initiative coordinated by the US State Department. It was launched in December of 2025 with the aim and focus of securing supply chains for artificial intelligence, specifically critical minerals, energy inputs, advanced manufacturing, semiconductors, and artificial intelligence infrastructure. So this is a screenshot directly from the State Department's website. And it says here, if the 20th century ran on oil and steel, the 21st century runs on compute and the minerals that feed it. This historic declaration hails a new economic security consensus, ensuring aligned partners build the AI ecosystem of tomorrow, from energy and critical minerals to high-end manufacturing models. So what does this mean? So this whole Pax Silica initiative is, being done under the banner of quote unquote national security to build cooperation among quote unquote trusted partners. But really it's about countering China, which dominates these critical fields. So by securing the different parts of the supply chain, from the minerals to the industrial hubs, the US can dictate the price, who can use it, and how it's used. So what does Pax Silica even mean? The name originates from Pax, a Latin word meaning peace and stability, with silica referring to the base material for components needed for AI. So it's peace through silicon. And Pax represents a long period of relative global or regional stability underwritten by a single hegemonic power. So for example, like Pax Romana was a concept under the Roman Empire, or like Pax Britannica for the British Empire. So now um, Jacob Hellberg and the US State Department, is very well aware that 21st century hegemony really runs on tech. Dominance is now defined by whoever controls the semiconductor supply chain and advanced AI. And the US wants to be that guy. So we go to the next slide. So Pax Silica, unlike typical trade deals, forums, or binding agreements, is actually a non-binding agreement or a strategic initiative. It allows the US the flexibility to gain commitment from other countries to secure US interests abroad through projects and investments ranging from critical minerals mining to building new data centers without regulations or restrictions. So the Pax Silica point person, he was already quoted in the previous slide, is Jacob Hellberg. So it really shows actually that him being the point person underscores really the military/security and anti-China agenda underlying Pax Silica. He is a senior advisor at Palantir, which I'm sure many people here have heard of. It's a CIA-funded data and analytics firm, which has contracts with the Pentagon, NATO, and Israel, oversees Project Maven, which uses AI in analyzing drone footage and making battlefield decisions. This also provides systems for ISIS surveillance and data integration. So truly evil things. So the Pax Silica is now made up of 24 signatories and one non-signatory participant, which is Taiwan. Taiwan endorsed the Pax Silica Declaration principles via the joint statement on the Pax Silica Declaration and US-Taiwan Economic Security Cooperation. The Philippines, which is where I'm from and is the movement that Bayan is leading, signed on in April 2026 and has actually committed the most concrete commitments to Pax Silica, really proving themselves as #1 US puppet. Oh, actually, can you go back? Sorry, Madam, I still have more to say. Yeah, so really the idea here is whoever has access to and control of critical minerals and control of critical bottlenecks effectively controls who gets advanced AI. So the different members here have specialized tasks. So Netherlands has complex machinery for printing advanced chips. South Korea builds high-speed memory chips to run AI. The UK has the blueprint for almost all modern chips. Qatar and UAE have cash and energy. Singapore has a logistics network and infrastructure like storing and shipping. As Israel has advanced experience in using AI for war. And for the Philippines, we have minerals and geography. So if you go to the next slide, I'll go into the Philippines some more. So like I mentioned, the Philippines had the first concrete underground project under Pax Silica, while many others just had policy pronouncements and plans. Marcos Jr., the president of the Philippines, handed over 4,000 acres to the US on a silver platter. Land, this beautiful land on the left hand side of the screen, to serve as an economic security zone in the Luzon Strait Corridor and New Clark City, Tarlac for Pax Silica. This is the only country so far to commit land within the coalition, proposing a land lease of up to 99 years for companies to set up shop within the zone. So what's important to understand is at the core of Pax Silica is anchored in it's really anchored in extraction and processing of critical minerals. So nickel, cobalt, related inputs essential to semiconductor manufacturing and advanced electronics. These materials form the base of a vertically integrated chain from mining to chip production. So even though it's, framed as economic security, supply chain resilience, this structure ultimately serves external strategic and military requirements rather than national development, which is what the Filipino people direly need. Semiconductors and advanced electronics are really central to the way contemporary warfare works today. So it's embedded in drones, missile systems, surveillance networks, and communications infrastructure. So by embedding production facilities within US aligned supply chains, the Philippines is being positioned as a support node in war-related production networks, supplying key technological inputs for sustained military operations. So really becoming a war hub in the Asia Pacific, strategically located very close to China. So in the, what the Philippine government is promising, an economic boost, over 200,000 jobs, but we know that these investments are actually going to stunt the Philippine economy and does not address the country's core systemic issues. What we really need is national industrialization and genuine agrarian reform, not an AI hub that will only benefit local compradors and foreign imperialists, especially the United States. So what are some of the impacts of Pax Silica on the people? So it's estimated to displace over 200,000 Aita people, indigenous peoples whose what do you call it? National domain, or sorry, my God, I forgot the word. Yutang Kabilin, ano yung English? But they're indigenous lands, right? They will be displaced from it. And then 15,000 farmers will also be displaced despite claims by the Basis Conversion and Development Authority. This type of development is very anti-people. It is a losing deal for the Filipino people and the peoples of the world. So while they claim to create thousands of jobs, we know that these will only be contractual and temporary, oriented towards export and extraction, rather than actually providing people with what they need domestically. Pax Silica also poses a risk for local farmers. So the agricultural land that's being threatened to be converted into industrial land will now, it'll be using 7 to 15 million liters for 3 to 5 months. So farmers will be having to compete for these hubs, with these hubs for water. Oh, sorry, I messed that up. Hold on. So farmers will be competing with the AI hub for water because farmers use 7 to 15 million liters for 3 to 5 months, but AI data centers require 20 to 30 million liters per day. So that's just one day versus 7 to 15 million liters for 3 to 5 months. Not to mention the threat of poisoning the water source for that people drink from in these areas. So it's really not a neutral program for industrial growth. Pax Silica represents a deeper integration of the Philippine economy into U.S. militarized production systems. And the movement to oppose Pax Silica across the Philippines is growing because the Philippines really represents ground zero in the fight against Pax Silica. So we must support this movement, be in solidarity with this movement. And as the Filipino diaspora, we are an extension of that movement. And we hope that we can link arms with the peoples of all the countries where Pax Silica threatens to set root. So we are actually building up to November, because that is when the Philippines and the US are set to sign a framework agreement for the proposed AI hub under the Pax Silica initiative. We are preparing to mobilize en masse, hoping to send at least 100 people to go and protest against the Association of Southeast Asian Nations Summit in Manila. So, and we'll be joining many others around the world because we're expecting US President Donald J. Trump to attend. And we can't let these imperialists know a day of peace in their lives. So we call for the rejection of Pax Silica and all related agreements that tie the Philippine economy to US war-making agenda. We call for a national industrial policy grounded in sovereignty that prioritizes national industrialization, genuine economic development, actual technology transfer, environmental protection, and workers' rights and welfare. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nieves. And we'll be sharing some of the info for those calls to action with all of our attendees. So please keep an eye out. Prepare if you want to go to the Philippines to confront these imperialists head on in November. But as Nieves said, right, really imperialist war means nothing good for the people. These economic initiatives only mean selling out the people and the land for the interests of the imperialists. When they drive to wage war, it is the people who suffer. But also what we're learning is that all around the world, the people in the most impacted parts of the world are fighting back at the forefronts. And in fact, as Nieves shared, some of the most thorough completion of the movement against the US-led war is really the fight for national sovereignty and liberation. And so continuing on that theme of what has the people's resistance to US-led war looked like, in the next part of this political situation, we will be inviting on speakers from on the ground, sharing about what the struggle against US-led war has looked like, whether that is the direct acts of war and military exercises which destroy the environment and people's livelihood, to the less overt war operations and militarization of our communities that lead to further displacement. And so for our next speaker, I would like to invite Laulani on to speak, if we can prepare to go to the next slide. But Laulani is the coordinator of Ho'opaepono Peace Project in Hawaii. She's a longtime activist, peace worker, musician, artist, and beloved member of the community as well. And so I would like to pass it off to Laulani whenever you're ready.
Aloha, everybody. Well, here we are on the day after the official end of the RIMPAC exercises. So the Rim of the Pacific exercises, which I'm sure many people are already familiar with, but for anyone who isn't, it is the world's largest naval exercise involving 31 different countries who come every 2 years to bomb our oceans, fire at and bomb our lands, and prepare for war all around the world. I should really emphasize that this is more than just preparation. It is more than just uh, you know, it's more than a game. This is war, and it is the operationalization of all of the technology, all of the weaponry, all of the different things that they are bringing together in order to repress peoples all over the world and bring everything under this colonial control of the United States and basically this gigantic imperialist power that involves them and so many others. And so the good thing about this, if there is a good thing about this, is that by fighting them, and we're not the only ones fighting them, which we love. Big shout out to San Diego and Aotearoa and all the other places that are also pushing back on this very destructive, very, very problematic happening in our world. And by pushing back, that's where we're developing relationships. We're developing consensus on what should happen. We're developing the cumulative idea of what human rights really mean. What does consent really mean? What does wellness and protection really mean? And I think that those things are so important. They are bringing together the greatest thoughts of our time in many, many ways. Not to underestimate the damage that is being done, not only to us, but also to all of those who will be harmed by that operationalization. Israel is one of the major technological partners in RIMPAC. It is said that, well, Israel's not bringing any ships. They don't need to bring ships. They're bringing their technology. They're bringing their forces to be able to control people on the technological level so that they may commit genocide together. And that is not okay. For those of you who don't know, Hawaii is an occupied country. We have been occupied by the United States basically since 1898 officially, but really since 1893, when a group of rogue sugar barons, mostly American, but who were Hawaiian citizens, treasonous Hawaiian citizens, basically decided to take over for a greater profit. And so in the course of that, we have held on to our country, which has never consented. There is no treaty. There is nothing that allows the United States to be here and to exert its dominance, not only on us, but over the world through our peaceful, neutral country. And that is the really key thing here, that Hawaii, along with many others, is a neutral hub of peace. That is what we are supposed to be, and that is what we are. And all of the violence that they are doing is something that in our resistance, and we have been resisting, we've been resisting in ceremony, we've been resisting in protest. We're going to go on Tuesday to, to the offices of the Congress people who fund all of these wars. And unfortunately, Hawaii's congressional delegation is very key to the money that goes to Israel, the money that goes to repression in the Philippines, the money that goes all over the world to cause war, and our congressional delegation is responsible. So we're going to them personally to deliver this letter and to begin the next 2 years of conversation, whether they like it or not. So, and by the way, just as a little note, if you can, everyone, please go to endrimpac.org. Actually, I have to put the www in the beginning, www.endrimpac.org, and sign that letter. And you can learn a lot about RIMPAC just from reading the letter, because it kind of lays out a lot of the damage that is done. So, mahalo, Leo. So that is that's kind of what's going on here in Hawaii. I know that only supposed to give a very short summary, so I guess that kind of wraps up my part, because I know that there's a lot to cover in this webinar. But just want to say we stand in solidarity with you. Stay healthy and stay strong, everybody. Stay in love. Don't let them damage your love, because it is love that is going to overcome all of this war, all of this havoc, all this wrongdoing that is taking place in our world. And we can do that. We can stand together. We can make this a better place. We can have the strength to overcome this madness, this foolishness, this genocide, this absolutely pilau, as we say, wrong and dirty activity in our world. And we will do it through everything that we've got. We don't need bombs. We don't need guns. Some people might, no judgment on that. For us, we're doing it through music. We're doing it through art. We're doing it through action. And we stand with all of you. So mahalo.
Thank you so much, Laulani, for reminding us, right? We're not just dealing with war provocations, war preparations. We're dealing with all-out war. But the people are resisting by all means, all across the world, in Hawaii, and in solidarity with people's movements elsewhere. For folks who don't know, as Laulani shared, in Hawaii, they've been taking action not just this year, but since the start of RIMPAC, and against all expressions of U.S. militarization on the islands. And we've been in solidarity here in the U.S. and in Southern California taking action as well. There was just a week of action against RIMPAC. And if you're based in Southern California or you're nearby, we're gearing up to go down to San Diego again as the ships return, to show that the people will continue to fight until the end of RIMPAC, until the end of all war exercises, until the U.S. out of our homelands as well. So thank you so much, Laulani. To close out this part of the discussion, though, as we mentioned, there are so many ways that the U.S.-led war rears its ugly head, right? The economic domination and plunder of the world's resources and people, the war exercises that are direct attacks against our communities, but also, as many mentioned in the chat, the different ways that the U.S. militarizes our communities and our homelands. And so for our last speaker of this opening discussion, I would like to invite Judith from the Haiti Action Committee to give us an understanding of what the militarization of Haiti and the Caribbean has looked like, and is its significance in the current context of US-led war, but also how the people are continuing to develop their fight against that. So welcome.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. We're going to start off with a couple of maps. This is the map. I think it's important because many times people don't understand where Haiti is and its relationship to the rest of the Caribbean. In 1804, the Haitian people kicked out the French and defeated Napoleon's army, the most powerful army in the world at that time. And they declared the first Black republic in the world. They welcomed anyone fleeing slavery and oppression and offered them sanctuary and freedom. Haiti was a beacon for independence and an end to enslavement throughout the world, and certainly in the United States. And because of that, they've been punished ever since. The one thing the white supremacist imperialist powers couldn't allow was a free Black republic in the Americas. The punishment included a massive debt to actually pay back, can you imagine, reparations to the French for the loss of their property and their slaves. It's the only time in the world. And it's estimated that that money, which they had to pay back until the 1940s, amounts to today more than $100 billion. They also had military occupations and colonial occupations, including an outright US military occupation from 1914 to 1934. And they have had continual interference since then. Haiti has always been a vital part of US imperialist strategy in the Caribbean. Next slide. Maybe we could move this up a little bit. As we know, and when we look at the Monroe Doctrine, which Trump likes to call the Donroe Doctrine, the US has always considered the Americas theirs. The US is ensuring today that right-wing governments are winning in Peru, Honduras, and Argentina, just to name a few. And the Caribbean forms a vital part of this strategy. Look at the map. Look how closely Haiti is to Cuba and Venezuela, which is down at the bottom. From Guantanamo, which you see is at the tip of Cuba, to the newly resurrected Roosevelt Roads in Puerto Rico, which is right over here at the other end of that island. The Caribbean is home to multiple US bases, and they're building more. And I will be sending a list of resources that people can look at, which have articles about where you can get more information. We've been told, in fact, that in the main airport in Port-au-Prince, which has now been closed for over a year to civilian flights, now has military personnel and equipment there. Next slide. This is a map of the buildup in the Caribbean to the invasion of Venezuela and the kidnapping of Maduro and his wife Flores. And you can see all of the different bases, and you can also see there are also multiple naval destroyers, and there's a huge naval destroyer sitting right off the coast of Haiti. But Marco Rubio isn't just concerned with Venezuela and Cuba, which people have already talked about. They're salivating to take it over with their increasing sanctions and embargoes. But he's constantly going back and forth to the meetings of CARICOM, which is the economic and political grouping of Caribbean nations, guaranteeing that they stay in line, or else. Next slide, back to the map of Haiti. The current situation in Haiti is the result of the 2004 violent coup against the democratically elected government of Jean-Bertrand Aristide, which is the most progressive government in the history of Haiti and one of the most progressive ever in Latin America. Since that time, there have been a series of right-wing governments that we call selected by the US and there's also been complete foreign occupation. Since 2017, there have been no elected officials in Haiti, none. And today, Haiti has descended into what grassroots organizers have called a hell on earth and a slow motion genocide. Next. Today, paramilitaries, so-called gangs, which are armed and subsidized by the elite, have taken control of much of Haiti. And this is, in the middle picture is Barbecue, who is one of the leaders of the gangs, who have now formed into one big coalition called Vive Ensemble. And make no mistake, these gangs are not revolutionaries. These are armed gangs wreaking terror on the people of Haiti. Paramilitaries have operated before, such as under Duvalier with the Tonton Macoutes, but today's paramilitaries find their origin in the government of Michel Martelly, who was selected by the US State Department and Hillary Clinton in 2011. Martelly used them to begin to rout out and terrorize progressive neighborhoods. And this really ramped up in 2018 in what is known as the La Saline Massacre. Next slide. And then the next slide. Anyway, I think this is out of order. Can you go to the next slide? Go back. Next. Yeah. And we'll go back to that other one. I was part of a delegation to La Saline after the massacre, and I wrote a human rights report. I'm also a member of the National Lawyers Guild, and I witnessed the result of what goes on in Haiti. And you can see here burnt out buildings. And what I saw included shot out buildings, including schools and small houses. I even saw the skeleton of a woman who had been burnt alive, and she wasn't the only one. And I met with hundreds of displaced men, women, and children living in fear and under impossible conditions. These massacres continue on a weekly, sometimes daily basis, and there was just another one last week. The goal of all this is to continue the coup of 2004 and crush the opposition. And this particular massacre was led by Barbecue. Go back to the guns. Oh, no, after this is the video. Let's see. No, go to the yes. Sorry, guns. There are probably at least 1 million weapons in Haiti. And as you can see, these are not just small handguns. They include assault rifles, machine guns, snipers, AK-47s, and Uzis. You name it. And they also include so-called ghost guns, which can be made from parts. And now people can print guns from 3D printers. And on top of that, there are now hundreds of drones, which are being used as bombs throughout Haiti. Yet, Haiti manufactures no weapons. So how is it possible that after years and years and evidence of hundreds of thousands of guns and even a UN arms embargo, these guns are still coming into Haiti and that they end up in the hands of paramilitaries? The answer is obvious. There is collusion between the US, the elites, and the gangs. Next slide. It should be the map. And this is a map of how the guns are coming into Haiti. The majority of these weapons are coming from the US. It's estimated that 78% are coming from Florida. We know how easy it is and legal it is to buy guns here in the US. So the guns are bought by middlemen in what's called straw purchases and then sold to other people and smuggled in either by boat or plane, coming directly to Haiti, as you can see, or through the Dominican Republic. And you see all the, and there are a few from other places. They're coming in multiple containers. Some of them are even shipped in Bibles. Like, that's how weird the whole thing is. And they're coming in because the border is very porous, and it's very big, and also the ports are controlled by the gangs or the elites, and now, in fact, even Erik Prince in Blackwater. So it's very easy and very corrupt and easy to get these weapons into Haiti. The paramilitaries have murdered, burned, and bombed markets, hospitals, schools, and entire neighborhoods. Major crops have been destroyed. Over 8,100 people have been killed in the last year alone. And this is probably an underestimation. Sexual violence is rampant. Young women to old women are being raped as a method of war. And as people know, rape as a strategy of war is a war crime. 1.4 million people in a population of only 12 million have been internally displaced. Think of what that means. More than half the population is facing food insecurity. And as food sources disappear, this number is growing. Thus, civil society is being completely destroyed. And now can you show the video? This is typical massacre. They're basically singing just a pop song You see the women on the ground, and they've all been killed. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it like that. So why? Why is this happening? When people think of Haiti, what do they think about? The poorest country in the hemisphere. But Haiti, like many other countries, like the Philippines, like so many other countries, isn't poor. It's been made poor. It's rich in resources and minerals. There's gold, copper, cobalt, and other minerals. It has beautiful land, beautiful beaches, and just as importantly, a labor force. And the US wants it all. They say they can't stop the weapons or gangs, but clearly this is not true. Reluctantly, the US, UN, and Canada have issued sanctions and arrest warrants for multiple gangs and officials like Barbecue or even Martelly. But somehow they can't catch them as they give press releases in front of the US Embassy in Haiti, or in Martelly's case, go back and forth to Miami. They want to create a situation where they hope people are so desperate that they will welcome any relief, including more troops and another imposed government. And at the moment, they're preparing they're preparing the groundworks to have another selection in which they will decide who wins, who runs, and who wins. But next slide. The people are resisting, as they always have resisted in Haiti. Grassroots organizing is continuing, and there are many, many civil defense groups in all the different neighborhoods throughout Haiti. People are fighting back. Unfortunately, now the police and the US government are targeting the civil defense groups, and even some nonprofits are denouncing them. Women are building institutions to help the thousands of women and girls who have been the victims of sexual violence. They're creating food co-ops, and they're trying to maintain some level of civil society. They're also forming schools because all of the schools have been closed. Still, the massacres continue, and more people are homeless and displaced. Added to this, next slide. Added to this is TPS termination. This means last week, the Supreme Court sanctioned the white supremacy of the Trump administration in the deportation of 350,000 Haitians, people who have been here for more than a decade, ordered back to a place that is unlivable for the people who already live there. And this is the advisory from the State Department. This is the State Department's own advisory. And basically it says, don't travel, and you should prepare your DNA. You should prepare a communication plan, and you should prepare your will. And this is the place that they want to send people back to. Also, the deportation of 350,000 Haitians is going to decimate the home health industry. 1/3 of those 350,000 are involved in home health. That's what the government wants to do. Basically, we consider this a form of ethnic cleansing, and we feel like this is just the tip of the iceberg. Next month, 100,000 Salvadorans are going to be deported. They can't deport them all at once. I am wrapping up. So this will be the equivalent of, can you do the next slide? We're asking people right now to call the Senate because there's a bill in the Senate, and this is what you can do. We know but we know that that's not the answer. We know the chances of that happening are slim, and that the real movement has to come from the grassroots and from mass mobilization. In San Francisco, there'll be a demonstration on next Wednesday, and you can get more information around that. But we're asking people to look out and be prepared for demonstrations and mass mobilizations throughout the country. And when ICE comes, we must be prepared to protect people and fight back. When we look at the situation around the world, we know that the US has a world strategy, a strategy of empire. And so we too, those that are fighting for liberation, we have to have a worldview too. We can't just remain in our silos, just concerned with our own fights. We have to be internationalists. We have to build a cohesive and international movement, a movement of resistance. Put up the next slide. From the Philippines to Palestine to Haiti and all around the world, one struggle, one fight.
Thank you so much for that very in-depth analysis on the history and ongoing fights in Haiti and the Caribbean. I don't uh, I don't have much to add in terms of that closer, but an important reminder for us, right? Um, the imperialists are international in their operations, international in the ways that they've been waging attacks on the people. We see everywhere they go, it means destruction, it means more people being displaced, it means loss of livelihood and even death. But at the same time, like Judith reminds us, we have to be internationalists. And we have to do everything in our power to advance our different struggles and fights and to extend solidarity between our people's movements to strike blows against imperialism wherever it shows itself. And so, as the movements for liberation and freedom strike blows against the US empire around the world, there's also an important role that we play here in the US, here in the heart of the empire, which is driving forward this war at all costs, right? We have an important role in extending solidarity with those people's movements for liberation. We have an important role in striking concrete blows here in the heart of the empire against the very corporations and people in power that are driving forward the militarization around the world. And we have an important role in building a militant political movement against US-led war in combination with the struggles of the people of the global South. And so with that, Nieves said it very well earlier. Um, they're waging war on the people, so we cannot let them have peace until we are actually able to fight for liberation. And so with that, I will be introducing our panel of speakers who will be sharing practical lessons and sharings from active fights and campaigns that are winning victories against the US war machine and these war profiteers that are making new ground and really taking up the fights in our communities. And we hope that this next part of the campaign sharing shows what fighting the US war machine can look like here and how we can continue to grow that fight as well. And so first and foremost, to kick us off, I will be introducing Jarek, who is a member of Anak Bayan Long Beach, as well as ILPS Southern California. And he is also part of the secretariat of the Anduril Out campaign coalition. And will be sharing with us what fighting a major war profiteer like Anduril has looked like and what it looks like to drive them out of your community or fight for that. So welcome on, Jarek. Thank you so much.
So, thank you for letting me speak on this panel. I'm really excited to share with you all this campaign that we're waging against Anduril. But yeah, before going into the details of the coalition itself, I'd like to start off with a bit of context on what is Anduril, what are its effects local to Southern California, nationally, and what role does it play globally, right? So, Anduril is this transnational AI weapons and surveillance manufacturer based here in Southern California. It was founded by self-proclaimed radical Zionist Palmer Luckey and ex-Palantir executives. This founder, he was actually backed by Peter Thiel, the founder of Palantir, and the U.S. government since the beginning of this work. We can see the significance of these connections with the U.S. government and the contracts that Anduril holds. They have a $250 million contract with Customs and Border Patrol for surveillance towers that help in the detaining of migrants on the US-Mexico border. They also have a $20 billion contract with the US military for the Lattice AI targeting system, which I'll talk a little more about later. They have contracts with entities outside the US as well. They have contracts with Taiwan, Korea, with the UAE. But yeah, as a SoCal-based company, we can see like Anduril has some pretty immediate effects on the local communities. I mentioned that it was based here in SoCal. They're headquartered specifically in Costa Mesa. Anduril has a close relationship with the institutions there in that region of SoCal, specifically with the University of California, Irvine. Palmer Luckey has been personally invited to speak there at the university, and the university touts Anduril as this company that STEM students should really like strive to work for after graduation. Anduril is also partnered with GKN Aerospace If you all haven't heard, GKN is actually responsible for a recent chemical leak in Garden Grove that displaced 40,000 residents, many of them of working class migrant families, right? Which will have like lasting environmental impacts that could cause future health problems. Um, but yeah, Anduril, like it has this presence in Orange County, but they are like expanding as the days pass. They're actually planning on building a new manufacturing facility here in Long Beach. Um, the close relationship between Anduril and UCI, we can see that even in Long Beach with a explicit pipeline for students in the community, the mayor actually explicitly said that he would want 4 to 6 technicians from LBCC for every engineer from Cal State Long Beach to go into the new Anduril manufacturing facility, right? So especially for the students of working class migrant families, it feels like they don't have that much of a choice, right? Like they're forced to choose between developing technologies used for war on their homelands or to join the military and directly participate in it just so they can make a living. Anduril actually gave $2 billion to the city amidst this construction, but really the question is like, will this money benefit the people? Obviously, it won't. The facility itself will contribute to the ongoing problems of the community, specifically their housing crisis. Though they claim that it will bring in prosperity through all these new jobs, that will actually, create a really high demand for housing that will raise rent and contribute to the ongoing displacement of working class migrant families. Zooming out a little bit to Los Angeles and just like other institutions contributing to AI weapons manufacturing, we can see at UCLA where they have a semiconductor hub that they recently announced amidst these budget cuts that are happening to student services, right? So they're partnering with a professor endowed with or by Northrop Grumman to really create a hub for the development of semiconductors that will be used in these AI technologies like Anduril, right? So generally, the profits of these weapons manufacturers are being prioritized over the needs of the people in these cities, right? So whether it be the cutting of student services, whether it be displacement or depriving students of a pro-people education, um, these these weapon companies, they don't serve the genuine needs of the people for them being here in Southern California. But Southern California is just one region, and Anduril's presence is not limited to that. We can see in other places in the US, for example, in Ohio, where they are building another manufacturing facility, their Arsenal One facility, that will be used to construct drones and aircraft, right? There's been a lack of transparency in what exactly the processes will be at that facility. But we can only imagine that it will contribute to like environmental destruction there in the region. Where, there's already, I believe the number was 95% of their wetlands are already destroyed there in Ohio. We can imagine that the introduction of a facility used to develop weapons for war will only worsen that, right? Anduril's also building facilities in Washington to build AI warships, right? And these technologies, they're not just being built here, but they're also being actively used and tested. We can see this in the San Fernando Valley, where some of Anduril's AI-assisted aircrafts were being tested with by the U.S. Air Force, both this year and last year, I believe. And the Ghost Shark, one of their like AI-powered submarines, was actually used in the Rim of the Pacific exercises in 2024. We mentioned those earlier, right? So this year's RIMPAC is coming to a close, but I just want to like shout out the mobilization that's happening in a week. Yes, if people are in the area and would like to come out to that. But yeah, I think just generally, it's pretty clear that there are like effects of Anduril throughout the US from their development and testing of AI weapons. Anduril actively is going against the genuine needs of the people through things like displacement, through things like environmental destruction, and a pipeline into the military-industrial complex for students. But the true gravity of these effects can really be seen in the role that Anduril plays in the U.S. imperialist war machine. If we think about it like a cycle of sorts, we can see SoCal at the beginning of that, right? Through the semiconductor hub at UCLA, the headquarters at Orange County for research and testing, and the manufacturing facility in Long Beach, the SoCal really serves as like the center for the development and building of these AI weapons, right? We're also testing them, like I mentioned, with the aircrafts in San Fernando Valley and the deployments in San Diego through military exercises. But really, where are these weapons going to be used, right? They're going to be used for the militarization of the global South and US advancement against their imperialist rival, China. I mentioned earlier that Anduril has contracts with foreign entities such as Korea. They have contracts with Korean Air for UAVs, with Hyundai for AI warships, with the upcoming Ulchi Freedom Shield military exercises held by South Korea and in close collaboration with the US. We can only imagine that they'll probably be using AI war technology like the ones by Anduril. We see them also being used in the Philippines. The Ghost X drone and Lattice AI being tested in the Balikatan and Salaktiv military exercises. These live missile firings, both in Korea and the Philippines, really serve to assert US dominance against their imperialist rival China and displace and endanger the common people, right? Especially in the countryside of the Philippines, where these live missile firings displace them. They can't fish, they can't farm, their livelihoods are deprived because the US uses their lands as a launching pad for war against China. Raising these tensions between the US and their allies and their rivals, it endangers the people. It puts targets on the back of the Korean people, of the Filipino people, with these escalating threats of war. I know I talked a lot about like military testing through like exercises, but ultimately they're being deployed in active war right now. We can see that in West Asia and Africa. Uh, I mentioned earlier how Palmer Luckey is or calls himself a radical Zionist. He has close ties to the Israeli state and other AI weapons manufacturers there. Anduril has been used in Palestine. Their Ghost X drone and the previously mentioned Maven AI system is being used in Iran. Anduril also helps arm the RSF in Sudan through their partnership with a company in UAE, right? So Anduril is really like arming these militaries that are contributing to the ongoing genocide of people in the global South. It is also these military exercises that enable the plunder of the global South for the resources necessary to even construct these weapons that are being used. Nieves talked a lot about the Pax Silica initiative, the initiative of the Philippines just giving away 4,000 acres of land for free to the US dedicated for semiconductor production. But, you know, they cannot produce these semiconductors without rich minerals, and they can't get rich minerals without control of the land. The Balikatan and Salakni military exercises that I mentioned earlier, that Anduril Tech was used in, also serve to strengthen the counterinsurgency through arming the armed forces of the Philippines and their NTF-LCAC, the National Task Force for Ending Local Communist Armed Conflict. So when the Philippine government makes deals like Pax Silica with the US and allows them to plunder their lands through, for example, the mining of minerals, they have to displace the people living on those lands. The Filipino people that fight back against this blatant encroachment by the US imperialists, that fight back against the Philippine government that sells them out to profit off of the US imperialist interests, they're violently repressed through this counterinsurgency, the counterinsurgency that's armed and strengthened by companies like Anduril. The semiconductor production through Pax Silica will allow for weapons manufacturers like Anduril to thrive in this era of AI warfare. It's also a key part of the US imperialist strategy to compete in the semiconductor supply chain and build weapons for rivalry with China. All of this at the expense of the Filipino people. So yeah, all that to say, that's exactly why the movement for genuine Filipino independence, the national democratic movement, is so important. It's essential in not just ending the suffering of the Filipino people, but ending the suffering of all the global South as a, the Philippines is really, like was said earlier, like ground zero. Like it's really where the U.S. is basing themselves in this war against China. A large part of the fight against that is waging fights against companies like Anduril that both facilitate and benefit from the suffering of the Filipino people. So yeah, here in SoCal, we're in such close proximity to these AI weapons manufacturers. So it's our responsibility to do our part in dismantling the US war machine. So that's why the Anduril Out of SoCal Coalition is waging the Anduril Out campaign and also contributing to the US Out of the Philippines campaign as a part of the broader fight against US imperialism. I guess that would be a good transition to really talk about like what is the Anduril Out of SoCal Coalition, right? For our points of unity, the organizations in our coalition really aim to expose and oppose Anduril as an engine of US-led wars of aggression that uses its weaponry and AI technology for attacks on global South communities through counterinsurgency and fascist attacks, which strengthens US military power and allied military buildups from Palestine and West Asia to the Philippines. We aim to expose and confront Anduril as a domestic threat to migrant and working class communities. Their technology supports surveillance, border militarization, and enforcement operations carried out by agencies such as Customs and Border Patrol, while its facilities and contracts contribute to displacement, environmental harm, and the expansion of the military-industrial complex. We oppose the recruitment of youth, students, and workers to be pawns for US war profiteers rather than productive contributors to society. And we seek to expose and challenge the ways military technology companies profit from and facilitate war, occupation, and repression. We demand the end of the use of AI for war and occupation and provide productive, not destructive jobs for the people. We demand for US troops out of the Philippines, US troops out of everywhere, and to end the use of Anduril and other air technologies for war games. We demand an end to the recruitment to Anduril from schools such as CSULB, UCI, and Long Beach Community College, and for these institutions to cut ties with the company as a whole. And we demand to stop the construction of Anduril's campus in Long Beach and to shut down Anduril. Ultimately, our coalition serves to unite the different fights for students, for workers, for migrants, and more against AI weapons manufacturers throughout the region, like Anduril, to not just bring an end to their impacts locally here in Southern California, but also globally against the larger US imperialist war machine. So yeah, I guess recently, as a pretty newly formed coalition, most of our tactics that we've been taking on in this fight are through community meetings and strategizing, right? Anduril and AI weapons manufacturing is pretty rapidly developing. So it's important for us to be able to draw from the strength and the creativity of the people. Recently, we had the Anduril Out of the Philippines educational discussion hosted by Bind USA, iChirp US, ILPS US, and also the coalition. We united with these organizations fighting for US out of the Philippines and against US imperialism. And through that, we're able to bring out folks from across SoCal and draw on their findings and insight to unite on concrete steps to steer the direction of the fight against Anduril, whether that was collaboration between campus organizations like I believe is Cal State Long Beach and Cal State LA, connection with other anti-militarism and anti-war movements. I believe the fight against like OpenAI and also the broader movement of SJP that has like a campaign against that AI company or outreach initiatives to expose Anduril to our local communities in Long Beach and in Orange County. We've also been pursuing petition writing. Our Legislative Action Committee is actually preparing to publish our petition to the city of Long Beach to push forward our coalition's demands and to get Anduril out of Long Beach. I think it's important to also take these legal forms of action to help mobilize people against these like very immediate targets in their community. I think primarily as a coalition, though, the lesson that we really want to like internalize is that we have to provide the outlet for organizations to unite their fights against these like narrow targets like Anduril. So we have to give the space for the collective strategizing, like those community meetings, the sharing of analysis, and also the distribution of tools for like propaganda and such. But really, this should be for the orgs to use in order to wage a fight particularized to their own immediate concerns and conditions. Anduril is just one of the gears in the US imperialist war machine. SoCal is just one region, right? Like, it is only through uniting with other organizations, with other coalitions, that we can really strike uh, decisive blows in this fight against US imperialism. So yeah, I think for those interested that are in SoCal, I want to call you all to join the Andro Out of SoCal campaign or coalition. It's a developing campaign, but I really believe it has the potential to stop these AI weapons manufacturers in their tracks. And if your organization hasn't already, please, we would love for you to join the International League of People Struggle, to join the broader fight against the US imperialist war machine. But yes, thank you all.
Thank you so much, Jarek, for sharing this fast-growing fight against Anduril and war profiteers like Anduril. The Anduril Out campaign is currently growing in Southern California, but as Jarek mentioned, Anduril's impacts, its operations extend throughout the West Coast and then around the world. And so there are so many ways to take part in it, whether you're a student fighting against its predatory targeted recruitment for development projects and contracts in the campuses, whether you're in a community that is impacted by the facilities and operations of Anduril, or you come from one of the countries where Anduril's weapons are applied, you can have a part in this fight as well. So thank you so much, Derek, for that. We're going to go across the other side of the country to the East Coast now to hear about another part of the US war machine and the manufacturing operations and an ongoing campaign that is developing against Hanwha. I would like to introduce Yaro from Anakbayan, Philly, to share about the Hanwha Out campaign.
Alrighty. Hi everyone. Magandang gabi. It is quite late over here on the East Coast. So I appreciate all of the folks who are on my side of the on my slice of the world and everybody that's here. It's very great to see everybody. Yes, thank you for the translation. So, yeah, I want to talk a little bit about Hanwha. So Hanwha, if you're not aware, is a South Korean multinational corporation. It's like the fifth largest business conglomerate or chaebol in the country. And most recently, as of June 20th, 2024, Hanwha recently bought the Philadelphia shipyard for $100 million with the intent to join Trump's like initiative to make American shipbuilding great again, which is an awful name, I will say. Um, so we've sorry, I'm just looking at my notes real quick. But yes, Hanwha bought the shipyard in order to again make American shipbuilding great again, but this is also like an effort to enhance the US like maritime capabilities and advance themselves in naval war, particularly against China, as like other people have kind of mentioned before about the tensions between the two powers there. Um, so part of why we wanted to like talk about Hanwha and what's like very important and significant about it too is that being based in Philadelphia, it has like a lot of ramifications and it touches on a lot of different like sectors and like conflicts that like a lot of our, our shared struggles are confronting today. So the significance of it, like being in Philadelphia, for example, is that, as a historically Black city, and considering the fact that Hanwha more or less like decided to export its own like manufacturing and labor to America because they have alleged like labor abuses like in their home country, going now to America to like kind of assert dominance and like ingratiate itself with the US and like more or less like taking advantage of like, Black labor here, and not having to deal with like stronger like unions or like other kind of like um collective movements over compared to like South Korea. So, um, that's like an aspect of it. And harking back on like what Jarek was mentioning about like Andorra out, Hanwha too is also in being in a city like Philadelphia, which is like somewhat referred to as an ed and med city. It is a city that is primarily known for its universities, such as like University of Pennsylvania, Drexel, Temple, as well as its medical systems and our hospitals. Hanwha has been building relationships with Temple University in order to like promote like kind of sorry, internship opportunities as well as other kind of like enticing things for youth and students in order to be involved in this larger war machine that we're all trying to combat. So we as part of Anak Bayan, in which we are specifically trying to organize like our youth and students, we're trying to connect to our larger communities and trying to get like a sense of like what is happening on the grounds here, like asking students, do you really want to be part of this like war machine, like do you understand the ramifications of what it means for Hanwha to be in here in Philadelphia, contributing to this war effort. Because despite what our officials are saying, because, our governor, Josh Shapiro, is all gung-ho for the Hanwha shipbuilding initiative, as well as our own mayor, Sherelle Parker. They're all like, yes, this is going to create jobs. This is going to be great for our economy. But we all understand, and we all have seen the script before, and that like none of this will actually like prove to really boost like our economy. This will not really bring anything back to the people that are like building this and that like whose blood, sweat, and tears are going to be like put into this entire effort. Um, Especially because Hanwha um is doing this other initiative to do a smart shipyard in which it's going to utilize robotics and AI as part of its manufacturing processes, which will ultimately also just like eliminate jobs for the people that they're supposedly going to employ. So long term, there's not going to be really anything that will support our people economically. If we're also thinking about the fact that Hanwha too is like potentially developing nuclear submarines. So that also has different ramifications about the public health of the city. What does it mean that, we might have nuclear waste like within our waters? What does it mean for our workers to be exposed to like potentially hazardous material? And like, what does it mean for the families who, may be exposed to that because their loved one is in those shipyards? So like we as Anak Bayan Philly noticing like all of these different ramifications, how this company and like what it represents is interacting with so many different sectors of like workers' rights, of youth and students, of like the larger like liberation front that we're putting up. We wanted to wage this campaign, and so we have been taking action since over this past year, trying to raise awareness about what Hanwha is and what it could essentially mean for our youth and students and our laborers and whatnot. Some of our tactics include like we've confronted, in fact, the Republic of Korea's president Lee Jae-myung when he visited the Hanwha shipyard, um, like on just last summer. We've also been able to connect with our solidarity allies to get insight from folks who are working inside the shipyard. So we know how, there are definitely like labor abuses happening within the city. And we know this because like we've been doing so much work in building on our alliance that we call PAAI, the Philadelphia Alliance Against Imperialism. So we are connecting the worker struggle, we're connecting our Filipino liberation movement, we're connecting the South Korean liberation movement through all of these like relationships and through being on the grounds and learning what's happening within our city. So just recently, we were able to have our own peace forum, in which we hosted several folks to talk about like what they have been able to do to what they have like analyzed and what they have carried out in order to fight against other war profiteers in the city. Because it's not just Hanwha, because there's also Lockheed Martin that's like imposing on Drexel. Um, I'm blanking on other ones, and I do want I do understand that there's probably a time limit. Um, but all to say that like, some of the lessons that we've learned in waging this campaign and waging this fight is that it is so, so important to be like on the ground with the people. And I've been saying it a lot. And I understand that a lot of people are saying it here that we have to be like more internationally minded. We have to be able to connect all of our conflicts and be able to identify the common enemy, the number one enemy that is like, the machine of US imperialism as it's like trying to assert its influence on like youth and students and like taking advantage of workers and like kind of like, like marginalized folks across the country. Um, and we've been able to make great strides in that like because we have our alliance and because we're on the grounds, we're able to like try to dissuade students from choosing, like internships as part of the military industrial complex. We took part in Drexel's walkout on Lockheed Martin and was able to also prop, Hanwha out there to like spread more awareness and hopefully get more of the youth and students involved in this movement here. And we've been doing a lot of flyering and outreach, especially with, this most recent 250th anniversary of America and Philadelphia also being like a key quote unquote birthplace of America, there has been a lot of attention like within our city and it's also exposed the um a lot of the shortcomings and failures of like our local government in supporting like the people that live here. Um what else? Yeah, so I'm looking through my notes and I'm trying not to echo too much about what was said about like, the international portions of our and the ramifications of our movement because it has been like so eloquently said by other people ahead of me. But you can also see that again, all of these struggles are so interwoven despite being like, across different, coastlines, across different countries. We are all, feeling the weight of US imperialism and um the conflict between like US and China encroaching on all of our lives here and like we're seeing it played out violently we're seeing it played out you know against like all folks women children migrant workers for another thing and so what we want to be able to, like inspire people to do in, talks like these and like in our actions is to like make sure that people are organizing and are like, inspired to join movements, whether it's like our Anak Bayan Philadelphia, whether they're organizing through another like movement or sector that's like more closely intertwined with them. We all understand how important it is to unite the masses to have people power to go against, they may have like all, the funds, they might have these kind of resources, but we as people are our own resources and are able to tap into something that's like incredibly powerful and has like moved nations and has like written history before. And yes. So I just wanted to emphasize, yeah, that like, we talk a lot about like the international movement. And so I also want to make sure that like we bring that also into our neighborhoods. We're able to like be in connection with our neighbors, with students at local universities or like, other workplaces and be like, hey, like, do you know what's going on? Do you want to take up the fight to, get this asshole out of our city. Like we don't want him in our backyard, like straight up. Um, so, oh gosh, I do want to be aware of time. So I just want to go ahead and advance to the next slide, please, because we do have a couple of other calls to action, some more concrete actions. We did put out a unity statement as part of the Philly Alliance Against Imperialism that you can read scanning the QR code on the left. And then on the right-hand side, we also have a Yeah, we have an endorsement that a letter that people can also sign on to if they want to read through that and, support our movement here. Um, yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and cede my time. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. I'm going to leave this on the screen for a second for folks, but it's also in the chat. But um, I think that's really important for us to remember what we mean when we say internationalists. We bring that all the way down to our communities, link those fights on the ground to the global struggle around the world, really understanding how our issues are really stemming from the same system that we're all fighting together. And we also have common interest in fighting for a different future and a better future as well. Um, to close out our panel sharings, we've heard about the fights against the war profiteers that are developing the technology used in surveillance and weapons. We hear from the manufacturers developing the very ships like Hanwha. But to close out our panel discussion today, I would like to invite Meredith up. Um, I'm sure many know Meredith, but Meredith is the director of Women Against Military Madness in Minneapolis. She's also a co-founder of the of Minnesota Anti-War Committee and is on the steering committee for the Anti-War Action Network. And Meredith is going to share with us about the fight in Minneapolis against Skydio, one of the corporations that is developing the drones that are used to surveil our communities and in military operations around the world. So please welcome Meredith. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and have this opportunity to speak with all of you. We don't get a lot of wins in the anti-war movement, so I think it's going to be particularly exciting to be able to talk to you about this recent win. On July 16th, the Minneapolis City Council defeated a proposal for a trial program for drones as first responders manufactured by Skydio. Skydio is a California-based tech company that makes autonomous surveillance drones with ties to Israel and ICE. This victory shows that when organizers tie in the at-home consequences of U.S. militarism, that they can win. This campaign was led by our local Free Palestine Coalition. It's a group of organizations that convened to mobilize the Twin Cities community against the Gaza genocide in November of 2023. Women Against Military Madness, WHAM, has been a member since its founding. From November 2023 to about a year and a half into the genocide, the FPC's primary campaign was organizing like massive mass protests like on a weekly basis or sometimes twice a month against U.S. financial support for Israel's genocide, with a particular focus on how Minnesota investments were also fueling and benefiting from the genocide. And one of our victories early on in the coalition was getting both the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis to pass ceasefire resolutions. And we were particularly pleased with the Minneapolis one because it had we had the opportunity to actually write some of the language, but also it was like one of the sharpest, we think, in the country, and that it actually said like that the US is sponsoring the genocide and said that, for example, that like people should divest. And we think that one of the reasons why we were successful in being able to get the override passed over our Zionist mayor, Jacob Frey, who really tries to weaponize being Jewish as our mayor, is that at the key rallies, we had key constituencies that the council needs to listen to. Like we had union speakers and we had Somalis. We actually have the largest Somali population outside of Mogadishu living in the Twin Cities. We had immigrant speakers. We had the BLM movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. We had anti-Zionist Jews who could counter the mayor's messaging. And so that our mass protests called for the ceasefire ordinance, and we really tried to show like this is what the city of Minneapolis looks like, and this is what the city of Minneapolis wants. After the steam started to wane on coming out for these frequent mass protests, the Free Palestine Coalition, led by Jewish Voice for Peace and Minnesota BDS communities, decided to go back to the Minneapolis City Council to target their 3-year, $500,000 contract with Zen City Okay. Zen City is an Israeli-founded tech company that developed surveillance technology that has since been used by law enforcement and municipalities in the US and abroad to analyze people's like social media postings and internet activity in ways that are deeply concerning to social justice and privacy advocates. Zen City, whose surveillance technology has its roots in Israel's military intelligence unit, because its founder of Zen City actually served in Unit 8200. Israel's all-encompassing surveillance of Palestinians has led to the development of this facial recognition, cell phone hacking, AI-powered technology that's now spilling into non-military use. And Zen City's surveillance technology has been used by police departments all over the United States to surveil social media posts during like protests for racial justice and to monitor criticism of the police and community outrage. And the Free Palestine Coalition argued that the MPD should not be allowed to partner with a company whose surveillance technology, literally was developed like as a part of a genocide, but it could be used as a tool of racist law enforcement, especially considering Minneapolis Police Department's own history of brutality and violence against those same communities. Like, hello, murder of George Floyd. So over like 2,000 people signed the petition to cut the contract. And what happened is that they were able to get 4 city council members to issue a press release on November 26th of 2025 saying like, hey, we want this contract to get rid of, we want you to get rid of this contract by November 1st, a position that was supported by a supermajority of the city council. And then on December 16th, the city council passed a budget that eliminated funding for Zen City, effectively withdrawing authorization for the contract and politically constraining the mayor. And since then, we have not had any more contracts with Zen City. So this gave us the opportunity to then be like, what else? Who else does the city of Minneapolis have contracts with? And the city of Minneapolis was approached by Skydio for a free trial for 75 days to see if we would like to have these horrible drones used in Minneapolis. So the FPC Skydio campaign this summer built on those relationships with City Hall and built on those like asks to our base, right? That we did for the ceasefire campaign and for the Zen City campaign. This summer, the Free Palestine Coalition successfully mobilized Minneapolis residents to call, to protest, and to pack the public hearing, and then to also pack the city council vote to show their strong opposition to the proposal. And this victory, I feel, gives us an outline for future successes where foreign policy and domestic policy issues overlap. So this 75-day free trial was offered to try to get this larger contract with the city of Minneapolis. The Free Palestine Coalition went on the offensive. We had multiple press conferences. We had an op-ed in the largest newspaper in the state. We did petitioning. We did social media campaign. And what we did is we explained that these AI-powered drones that Israel uses to surveil Palestinians as a part of its genocide in Gaza should not be put in the hands of the same Minneapolis Police Department that murdered George Floyd. It looked particularly clear that the Minneapolis Police Department was going to use their drones to surveil Black and brown residents. Like literally, they didn't even try to pretend this because they were asking to start this pilot program only in wards 4 and wards 5, which are in North Minneapolis, which is like a disproportionately Black part of the city. And residents in those neighborhoods in Ward 4 and Ward 5 actually started their own petition drive to collect signatures against the proposal. And although they weren't successful at getting their horribly pro-cop city council members to change their votes, they really were able to challenge the narrative of like city council member Vita, who's like, no, we need this for North. They were like, no, we don't want this for North. But they weren't really able to get more press coverage and show that like actually she wasn't speaking for her constituents. And they had a huge turnout at all these different actions where they're having votes and at hearings. And interestingly enough, the networks that were used for these communities to do this type of petitioning all came out of the anti-ICE work that was happening in Minneapolis in January and February. That a lot of these, community groups and signal chats were started during the fight against ICE, and then those same community groups and signal chats were used to fight against surveillance. The Free Palestine Coalition, since its founding, has been much more than a coalition of just anti-war and pro-Palestine groups, which I think has been key to our success. We've had many other Palestine like coalitions in the 30 years I've been doing organizing in Minneapolis, but this is the first one that really has groups that aren't just focused on anti-war work that are in it. And so the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice, TCC4J, a local police accountability group, and Black Lives Matter group, as well as the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee, have both been members of the organization of the Free Palestine Coalition from day one. And they were essential to addressing how Skydio's autonomous drones would pose a threat to Minneapolis's Black and immigrant residents. We featured their testimonials in press conferences, and they were excellent at connecting the use of drones in Palestine with North Minneapolis because they had actually already been talking about Palestine for the past 3 years with us. The public hearing that we had on July 8th was so packed that the city of Minneapolis had to have not only the chamber where they were, having the hearing, but they had to give us an overflow room. The Minneapolis police officers showed up to testify that overseeing, existing state laws on drone usage would prevent any of these surveillance concerns that people had. Over 40 Minneapolis residents signed up to speak against on the Skydio proposal, and all of them spoke against the proposal. Speakers pointed out that these limitations contain exceptions for vague criteria like safety risks and suspicious criminal activity. And people are like, dude, these laws are literally guaranteeing that these are going to be weaponized against protesters and weaponized against political opponents and weaponized against our actual neighbors. Speakers addressed the connections between how Skydio drones were being used to commit genocide in Palestine and how these surveillance techniques that the company improved on Palestinians should not be therefore then used on our own residents, our Black and brown residents in Minneapolis. Many speakers addressed the concern that drones could be requisitioned for use by the federal government and about how the federal government already used drones to terrorize Minneapolis people during Operation Metro Surge this winter. I don't think our campaign would have been successful if we had gone at this from a Palestine focus alone. The issue of Palestine was not the main reason that people came out to protest, not the main reason people came to the hearing, and not the main reason people came to the vote. But the issues of police surveillance, police brutality, and federal occupation during the Operation of Metro Surge were actually the main motivators. But no one said, we don't care about Palestine. All these messages intertwined incredibly well. We were successful in communicating that this technology was created and improved under the surveillance of Palestinians by Israel during a genocide in our speeches, our social media work, and it actually came through the media coverage. So they repeatedly talked about Palestine. So Palestine might not have been the main motivator that got people to come out, but everybody who read any of those news articles or heard any of those speeches or heard those testimonies or saw the signs during the hearings totally understood that Palestine was a motivator for many of us. No one in the public comments section at these public hearings spoke in favor of the technology being used anywhere, including on Palestinians. And by uniting the Palestine Solidarity Movement and the Black Lives Matter movement and the pro-immigrant movements in Minneapolis, fundamentally, I think that's what made this campaign unstoppable. I'm excited about our victory because I don't really feel like we get to win enough. And I'm hoping we can now target the city of St. Paul, which already has a Skydio contract. But we're also excited because I know that there's folks from the Bay Area that are also interested in doing work against Skydio. On the last meeting I had with people from IWA, from the International Women's Alliance, they were talking about the fact that Skydio drones are made in San Francisco, and I learned that actually these Skydio drones are used to kill people and terrorize people in the Philippines. So I think there's even more opportunities to make these connections so that we can really, say, hey, we don't want to spend our money. We don't want to give our money to weapons manufacturers, and we don't want to be supporting companies like Skydio, and that our tax money should be spent on human needs and not on war. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Meredith. So many rich lessons from the fight against Skydio. I think it among them is really proof of how much can be won through bringing together a broad range of people and movements and organizations and forces, and also what it looks like so concretely and straightforwardly to express international solidarity. Like you said, it was so obvious for the people in the community to see their tie with the fight in Palestine, and we can continue to enliven that spirit as well. I know you said sometimes we don't get to win often, but there will be wins like this, and there will be many, many more wins, and there have been, and they'll continue to grow as well, and we're all a part of that. And so, um, we're gonna do some closeout with some calls to action, but then we'll still have some time at the end for questions and answers from the panelists. We're gonna go a little bit a few minutes longer, so if folks would like to stick around to ask questions, you can. But we wanted to share some calls to action with all of you, so we can be on the same page how we're going to continue after this webinar, after this peace forum, in advancing the fights. Once again, I just want to thank every single one of our speakers for bringing to the table the fights in your communities, the lessons and experiences, and sharing about these campaigns that are actually striking concrete blows against U.S. imperialism and the U.S. war machine. We saw how vibrant and dynamic the growing movement is. This is just a small sample size of the massively growing anti-war movement, whether it's targeting drone manufacturers, surveilling our communities and bombing our homelands, the corporations that are constructing the military bases abroad, or the arms trafficking directly involved in massacres around the world. This movement against the war machine is growing. And we're seeing how desperate the imperialists are becoming. They're resorting to more desperate means of repressing the people's movement, but they're not succeeding, right? They're not succeeding. And, you hear now they're trying to label everyone critical of US-led war, of the US government, is now a quote unquote far-left terrorist, but they're really exposing themselves for how rotten they are. I think Meredith said at the end, right? These don't serve the interests of the people. And they're really showing what side they stand on. And we have a choice now. Do you stand with the people, or do you stand with the enemies of the people? And everyone on this call is choosing to stand with the people. And it's really through our fighting campaigns that we fight rising militarism, fascist attacks, and really continue to expose and oppose the imperialists and their master currently leading the helm. I want to acknowledge that each of these campaigns and victories reveals what we were saying at the beginning. The U.S. empire and the U.S. war machine are not invincible. As these multi-million-dollar war profiteers spread themselves across the world and across our communities, these are also battlegrounds. Every single one of those communities that they embed themselves in is a community that we can organize and mobilize to take up the struggle and fight. And with that, I want to bring us back to what we shared at the beginning of the conversation here, which is that our hope was not only to bring together all of these different campaigns and movements to share here, but our hope is that we can take up the fight together coming out of this. We want to call on all of you to take the opportunity right now to go back into your communities and launch campaigns of your own, wage these fights against local war profiteers and other manifestations of US-led war. Like we said, the empire is spreading itself thin, and now is our time to strike a decisive blow. And so we want to encourage you all, take up the opportunity to build campaigns. If you're in one of the areas where these campaigns that you heard about today are being waged, join them, plug in. But they're not confined to just whatever city they're based in, but actually have reach all across the country. So we want to encourage you all to join them. And if you're already waging a campaign, we want to invite you all to bring those campaigns together. We can see how we're even stronger when we're able to coordinate all these different fights and blows. And so we want to show the unity in these different campaigns and coordinating these struggles, and continue to live up to the spirit of international solidarity in practice. As we advance our struggles, we also link them to the fights in the global south as well. And so one of the ways we want to bring these fights together is we want to encourage you all to sign on to the Oppose US-Led War and Plunder Declaration of Unity. This is a campaign and a platform through which we're trying to bring together these different fights initiated by ILPS and the Resist US-Led War movement. And it is enlivened by these very fights on the ground. And so we encourage you all to check it out on our website or this QR code where you can sign on to the to show the unity of the people against the against US-led war and plunder. And we want to continue to develop these fights. And lastly, there were many calls to action shared. We will be compiling the different sign-ons and petitions and other information, and we'll share it out to everyone again. But some particular additional calls to action we wanted to highlight as concrete ways to take up the fight against US militarism and continue to coordinate. First and foremost, Lalani gave us a really good picture of the impacts of RIMPAC and similar war exercises, but also the fight against it. Military exercises really continue to serve as a testing ground for weapons technology and really are opportunities for the US to train other militaries and in their own counterinsurgency efforts and really align them with their military interests. And so we want to encourage and call for all of you to join the People's Caravan Against War Drills, which is a campaign globally by the Resist US-led war movement as a continuation of the fight against RIMPAC. Laulani mentioned we're just coming at the tail end of RIMPAC, but we need to continue the fight from here as well. And our goal is, like we said, one day to end RIMPAC and all war exercises. So we invite you all to join this campaign as it continues. Additionally, as we've seen, whether it's Skydio or Anduril or any other corporations, AI is really artificial intelligence is really increasingly integrated into the US's military operations and strategy. And there's growing competition to develop AI, but it's dragging the world closer to the brink of war and further competition over resources and labor to exploit. And we really need to mount a big fight against the imperialist artificial intelligence and how they are destroying the world's environment in order to develop the supply chain to serve these needs. And Nieves was able to share what it's looked like in the Philippines, but this Pax Silica initiative is something that will impact the whole entire world. And so we really want to ask you all to join us in building a militant fight against Pax Silica and similar initiatives that are really driving forward the US war machine and the plunder of our homeland. So you can check out this this campaign to reject Pax Silica, and it's closely tied with our overall fight against US-led war internationally. The last couple of calls to action I want to share. Of course, I'm sure many are aware on this call, but this is really a time where US military intervention in Cuba is really heightening. There's more and more threats against Cuba and the Cuban people, and war could break out at any time. And so we would like to uplift the calls from the National Network on Cuba to join their No War on Cuba campaign and demand an end to US military escalation, an end to the bogus terror listing of the Cuban government, and an end to the economic blockade, as well as an end to US military occupation of Cuba via Guantanamo Bay. Cuba is a perfect example of US the impacts of US militarism, but also steadfast resistance to said militarism as well. Last but not least, they weren't able to be on for this part of the call to share, but our comrades and friends in Norutol continue to wage their US out of Korea campaign, of which ILPS is proud to be an endorser and partner of. And as we are approaching August 15th, we're really approaching the commemoration of sorry, the commemoration of National Liberation Day. As they continue to advance the U.S. out of the Korea campaign, they are calling for a day of action to oppose U.S.'s Ulchi Freedom Shield war exercises in Korea, and to oppose continued U.S. buildup to war in the Asia Pacific and against China and against the Korean people. And so we encourage you all to join the U.S. Out of Korea campaign, but also to join these actions that are happening across the country. ILPS members will be out in the streets alongside Noruto, and this year, actually, as a sign of international solidarity of people's movements, this is a joint effort of Bayan USA and Noruto as well, to show the solidarity between the people's movement in the Philippines and the people's movement in Korea, and as an example for resistance movements around the world. So please check out one of these actions, or reach out if you'd like to join on and take part in any way as well. So thank you so much, everyone. There's so many more calls to action as well being shared in the chat, but we appreciate you all staying on with us, and we hope that we will continue to see each other, and we'll see more and more faces in this movement. We'll win more victories, and take it even further, not just against war profiteers, but we'll take the fight to end imperialism itself and to liberate our homelands and our communities. So thank you all so much. With that, I will bring it back. We have a couple minutes for some questions to close out, and deepen the discussion before we wrap up for today. So, oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. If you're interested in learning more about ILPS, you can check us out at our website, ilps.us, and you can access this QR code. We have information about our campaigns. You can also find us on social media at ilps.us, and if you're interested in joining, you can do so there as well. And we would love to continue to build the anti-imperialist movement with you all. So feel free to reach out to me as well and any of the other members of ILPS too. But now we'll go, I think, to questions. We do have a couple already stacked up. So I will try to ask, I think we have time for maybe two of them. The first one I wanted to ask was shared by one of our folks living in Los Angeles or occupied Tavangar territory, and they're sharing that they are a college student and are asking how they can act for the global resistance against U.S. empire, and particularly are asking how they can and should organize their communities and their neighborhood and their campus against the U.S. and in support of those resisting U.S. empire. So really, what does it look like for those of us on our campuses and our communities? So I want to pass it to Jarek first, if you're able to answer this one.
Yes, I'd love to answer this question. I think as a fellow college student, the simplest answer I can give to you really is to just get organized, right? The power of the movement against the US empire really lies in the people, in our strength in numbers. I know there are a lot of local organizations in Los Angeles that are waging a lot of great fights, particularly in the youth and student sector, whether it's the Palestinian solidarity organizations fighting for divestment, like SJP, or Filipino youth organizations. Shout out Anak Bayan, but yes. In terms of how, though, I think that'll be very dependent on the conditions of your campus and your neighborhood. But you can't act on those conditions without thorough investigation, right? The organization that you decide to join, you should be talking to your neighbors, talking to your peers, finding out like what do they really care about and what are their immediate concerns. It's only after that close investigation that you can find ways to agitate them, to identify engaging ways to organize them into the movement. And so I've identified targets for them to mobilize against, right? For us in the coalition, what that looked like, we would have had the basis for our formation without the community meetings and town halls that are being held throughout the region. I know, shout out to the folks at UCI. I know like they were really like starting up the fight against like Andro, like hearing from the issues of like STEM students and how they really feel about AI weapons manufacturers, pipelining them into the military industrial complex. There was also the community meeting in Long Beach where we really got to hear from the insight of local community members and like how they really felt about the facility that was being built there. But yeah, we can't bring these fights from our coalition to the campuses, though, without bringing those same kinds of spaces, to hear people's issues, for students, for students to express their issues. So yeah, ultimately, just like get organized, and then through that organization, investigate the issues of your community, and then from that, you can show the connections to the broader issue of U.S. imperialism and the ongoing movements resisting it. All of that to involve them in a campaign that really speaks to their issues. But yeah, I don't know if others would like to add to that.
Thank you so much, Jarek. And not to volunteer you, but I'm sure all of the different students and community members on the call would love to chat more about how we can build out these types of campaigns together. We do have time for one more question. There's, of course, many things we can continue to discuss, but that's just a reminder for us to talk in person when we see each other as well. But we did have one more question for Meredith, if you're able to share. But building on the lessons you had shared around, bringing together such a massive coalition, the question was, if you could kind of build on that sharing and share what has been effective, especially in bringing communities of working people together here in the U.S., not only to see the importance of these types of fights against U.S.-led war, but to actually motivate their participation in taking up the fight. So kind of what have been effective ways to really help people in the U.S., especially working people, take action in the anti-imperialist struggle?
I think one of the reasons why we're able to get buy-in from movements outside of the anti-war movement is because the anti-war movement shows up for these other movements. So like we had a huge upsurge during George Floyd, and like that wasn't work that I was leading, and I'm obviously not Black, but like every weekend, that's what the anti-war committee was doing in that time period. We were carrying the sound system, we were bringing the sound system, we are bringing the signs, we're doing the marshaling. Like if there was work that needed to get done, we were helping do that, even though, some people might have been like, well, that doesn't seem like anti-war work, but it is. And so, for example, that relationship, that trust um, with the Black Lives Matter movement was then ready and willing to like step up for the Palestine movement, because they were like, wait a minute, all these people with keffiyehs have been showing up at all our shit. Like, we're gonna show up at their shit. Like, it built trust in that way. But similarly, we've been prioritizing having these relationships between anti-war organizations like Women Against Military Madness and the Anti-War Committee, in participating in events that have been organized by the Twin Cities Coalition for Justice and the Minnesota Immigrant Rights Action Committee for years. And so I just think it's important, like you can't just show up and be like, hey, our shit is important, like you need to show up. But for example, we were better prepared for October 7th because we had been a part of all that organizing that had happened for George Floyd. Does that make sense? Like we were not having our own protests at that time, but we were better at being able to do things like do marshaling and plan routes and things like that, because we had been a part of all these massive actions of thousands of people in our home community. And so like if you don't take the time off when it's not your issue du jour, you can use that as an opportunity to build your group and build your group's capacity. And then that will also mean that other groups can help you later. But like similarly, during the upsurge around Palestine, the Climate Justice Committee here in Minnesota, like they've spent a lot, and the student group here, SDS, they've spent a lot of time marshaling all of our stuff and really helping provide the infrastructure for our protests. And I just feel like then you get that back, right? When later on you're having that upsurge and you need that community support and you need that solidarity. And so I feel like we have a community in in the Twin Cities where people understand that um if it that it strengthens your work if you strengthen other people's work.
Thank you so much, Meredith. really beautifully said. I mean, just a reminder, right? Solidarity is a daily practice. It's not just a slogan or a catchphrase, but it's actually how do we show up for each other in the day to day? How do we learn from each other's struggles? How do we understand that our victories are hand in hand? And I really appreciate that. And I think that's a wonderful place to close out today's discussion as well. And um, uh, I once again thank everyone for joining. Thank all of our speakers. Please join these campaigns, join these fights. We will be sharing this online as well. So if any of your community members were not able to join the discussion today, we invite you all to continue to share it as well. And I hope to see you all in the streets together in your communities and fighting. And I hope that we're able to continue to build a mass movement. And again, a reminder that we have to remember that victory is possible, achievable, and that we are decisive makers of history. And we got to fight like that too. So let's do it until we bring down the whole war machine and imperialism itself. Thank you all and have a good night.